Sean and Hayden, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you here. You two are my first ski/snowboarders, so I'm so excited to dig into that. And it's also my first three-way podcast, so we're going to see how this goes in real time. But now what drew me onto the two of you is that, Sean, you recently released, and let me get the name right here, the Fairylands... I'm sorry, Fairy Meadows, the story behind the lines. It's like buried in my notes there. An amazing ski film. I would introduce you both as ski mountaineers, snowboard mountaineers, but I wanted to give you two a chance to do your own intros.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I would definitely describe myself as that. Yeah, I've been skiing since I was 2, and yeah, I got the love of skiing from my mother, who originally I'm from Fort McMurray in Alberta, which is a small town in northern Alberta with a ski hill that's maybe 100 meters long going down to the river valley. And I learned to ski at a very young age up there. And I ski raced in Calgary for a few years, slalom and GS. And then after university, I got really into ski touring and ski mountaineering. So I was lucky enough to meet Hayden and a good group of guys.
Yeah, I like to call myself a wannabe snowboard mountaineer because I don't really do it professionally. I still have a full-time job. I'm a utility arborist, so I work for the local utility company, just keeping their lines clear of trees and whatnot.
Right on. And it's cool to see that it sounds like the two of you have really developed this skill set over time. Now, for my audience, because it's such a broad outdoor kind of baseline here, can you guys explain a little bit about, I guess in my head, I'm using maybe the Fairy Meadows as an example of what is the difference when you go into the backcountry versus maybe the more familiar, like resort style downhill skiing?
Well, my first, I guess the first time I was exposed to that at a large scale was in Europe, and it's very easy to get into gnarly terrain off the resorts there, especially in Austria. Most people ski on the piste is kind of how it's said, and over there you can get into serious glaciers, serious crevasses, like cliffed out on huge lines just off the lifts. And you really have to know what you're doing. So ski mountaineering over here is similar, but everything is, or what we do is accessed by human power. So you're walking uphill, your skis turn into like these bindings. Will people be able to see these bindings, or will it be a podcast? Okay. Yeah, the
if you're listening on YouTube, you're going to be able to see the bindings. But if you're listening on Spotify, maybe describe what exactly is happening.
So the bindings will change over into a touring mode, and on Hayden's slipboard, the board splits in two. The bindings rotate, so you're walking like skis uphill, and you've got what's called skins that go on the bottom. We can go up some quite steep angled stuff like that. It's actually very impressive the first time you go what you can get up. You zigzag your way up. So a lot of these lines, especially some of the bigger lines that we've done, we'll ski tour to the base, and then it's 2 ice axes and crampons. And Hayden, maybe I'll let you take that over. Hayden also has the habit of leaving his ice axes on the mountain. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Sean's a skier and I'm a split boarder. So my snowboard basically breaks in half, and I go uphill, kind of like skis. There's a couple different ways you can do it. Some guys use like traditional snowboard boots. I actually use ski boots that are kind of customized for snowboarding, which is kind of cool. So yeah, so you tour up like that, and then when you get to the summit, you put your board together, you switch your bindings around into snowboard mode, and then you ride down like it's a normal snowboard. Yeah, like Sean was saying, those skins can get up to some pretty steep stuff, but when you can't get, when it gets too steep, you got to switch to boot packing, where we'll put our board or skis on our backpack and we'll actually just straight up climb like a normal kind of mountaineering route. And what Sean was alluding to with me losing my ice axe is we were doing Mount Harrison a few years ago, and on the ride down, I actually fell and self-arrested with it, and I left it there in the ice.
And to give that a little more context, it's a beautiful video that you have to see. I can send you the link later, but Hayden's going down and he's on a probably 55-degree slope on pretty much sheer ice. We had really good snow above and below, and we had essentially ice climbed this one section with skis and snowboards on our back, with crampons, which are essentially tools that dig into the ice. So on our way down, I'm filming with the drone from the top. My hands are freezing, and our buddy Brian was the first to go. And when he went, there's a small avalanche that swept the snow off, and there wasn't that much snow to begin with. So we've got this very thin layer of snow and ice, and Hayden was the next to go, and he self-arrested with his ice axe, which was very impressive, about some probably 1,000-foot cliffs that is an absolute no-fall zone, where unfortunately he had a little fall, and one ice axe blew off, and I actually have drone footage of this, and I think you had enough self-awareness to grab your second ice axe and actually off your shoulder, right, and self-rest with that one. Is that correct, Hayden?
Yeah, shout out to Nikolai Shermer. I watch his YouTube videos all the time. He's a professional skier. And it's a little trick I saw in one of his videos that he tucks an ice axe in his shoulder. And so I thought of that at the top, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I really need it, but might as well throw it up there in case. Turns out I need it.
So Hayden, now are you, I would have thought that when you descend, you would want to put the ice axes away and like just kind of have them out of the way just because of the danger factor. But it sounds like you want or need quick access to them.
That totally depends on what you're doing. On a nice powder day or anything like that, I'm putting them away. But on a steep, high-risk line like that, where if I'm going to slip out and slide off the cliff, that ice axe is the only thing that's going to save me. So I have it out. I just have one in my backhand, and I kind of hold it with the pointy end pointing down and just kind of ride with it loose for the most part until I need it.
Interesting. Okay, and so for context, now a mountain like this one, Mount Harrison, I'm getting the vibe that this is a long day or a really long day kind of trip, where you guys are skinning up. How many miles, how many kilometers are you going? And then, kind of, it sounds like you transfer over to a more mountaineering setup. Can you kind of walk us through how long it takes to get to the top, how long it takes to get down, and kind of the logistics of putting all that together?
So the logistics on a trip like this are absolutely massive. This was a multi-year adventure and took 3 attempts. So I had originally gone there. I think that was that three winters ago, and we were a little too late in the season. We had pretty much you want to go in spring. So when the spring snowpack heats up and it melts, it becomes this one solid layer. So you don't have to worry about avalanches if you go at the right time of day. And it's a fine line between having a snowpack that's super solid and super stable and having a snowpack that has enough snow on it that still offers grip and powder for you to ski on some of these steep lines. So I was there about 3 years ago, and conditions weren't right. We got most of the way up the couloir. It was pretty icy. We had avalanches going off between us when the sun below us when the sun was hitting the slope, and we had to turn around about midway up the couloir. So I went. One of the guys that I originally did it with, I don't think he was into going back up there again. So I convinced Hayden and my buddy Brian to go with me. And just to get there is probably a 6 to 7 hour. Yeah, it's probably a 6 to 7 hour drive from Calgary, and then 17 kilometers to base camp. Yeah, hey, do you want to talk about the logistics just to get to base camp?
Yeah. So, well, we did it. Yeah, we did it twice. So, yeah, Sean went 3 times. I went twice. So Sean's second attempt, my first attempt, we went out, and yeah, it's quite a drive out there. 6 hours from Calgary, a lot of like logging roads and whatnot. And so we parked the car, and kind of where the last point of snow, and then we skinned in from there. Yeah, 17 kilometers, and that got us to the base of the mountain, and then we set up camp. And so we dug a trench and set our tent up in the trench and camped out. And on that attempt, it actually snowed overnight, which it wasn't supposed to. So we woke up at 4 a.m. and go do it and see all this new snow, and we're kind of thinking, should we go? We go up a little bit to poke around, and we just saw some activity, and we said no and turned around. So we ended up going home. So we, 17 kilometers both ways for nothing almost. And so next time I told Sean, I'm not walking back there. We've got to figure something else out. So we had the great idea of renting this side-by-side with snow tracks on it and use that to get back there.
And one of the impressive things actually that I think is a key part of the story, as we were driving out there, it's quite a remote road and you're in the middle of nowhere, and you should bring no one really goes out there, and you should definitely bring like an axe and a saw, which we didn't. So there's all these big avalanches and we're moving trees out of the way and we're just having to push them over, and Hayden rigs up there was this big tree in the way we couldn't drive around, and there's no way to gain around it. And thank God, because Hayden is a very accomplished arborist, he set up this, I think it was a 5-to-1. Maybe you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's just like I set up in another tree a 5-to-1 pulley system to pull this tree out of the way, because we didn't bring any saws or anything, which I'm an arborist. I have access to all these saws and didn't bring anything. So we had to use the pulley system with our glacier rope to pull the tree out of the way.
So that was the first thing that went wrong. But we tour all the way in, and we're with our buddy Brian. It was supposed to be blue for a couple days. Like nothing was supposed to go crazy. So we get there, and to save weight, because we're walking in, I think it was 17K. We didn't bring water, and we brought a little stove. So we're like, okay, well, when we get up there, we'll melt some snow. So we'll have some water to drink because we're exhausted from 17K, and then we'll start setting up camp, and get our sleeping bags and sleeping mats set up. So we get up there, and our buddy Brian was supposed to bring the stove and supposed to bring the a little propane for it. And we get up there, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna set the camp. And I was like, can you melt us some water? I'm dying. I'm so thirsty. And he turns it on, and dies almost immediately. He's like, oh, I brought the wrong like canister. So we're up there, and there's no water. Like you can't get any water up there. And then Brian was like, oh man, I totally forgot my sleeping mat. So it's like pretty cold if you sleep on the ground in the snow. Like we're kind of just at the base of a glacier there. And then like a couple minutes later, he's like, oh man. I was like, oh, and now he's like, oh, I forgot my sleeping bag. So I give him my bivvy. I give him our backpacks to sleep on, kind of like cuddle up in the tent. I'm so thirsty, so I'm melting water like in a little an Nalgene bottle, and I'm putting it on my body, hoping the body will melt it so that I have some water to drink, which is a very inefficient way of doing that. And then we woke up in the morning, and there's all this snow that we didn't expect. We start going up the couloir, and an avalanche just comes right down the couloir, like to the right of me. And we're like, oh, we gotta pull the plug. So we turn around, go back, and kind of on the way back, I'm like, oh, we got all the way out there. We need to go back and get this. Like this is attempt number 3. So we had this stupid idea to rent the snowcat with tracks, and So our buddy is just amazing. Really big shout out to Nathan. Picks it up in Red Deer, drives it all the way out with his truck. We get it just to the base and start going up. And the company that we rented it from just gave us a lemon. So we went like, what was it, Hayden? Like a kilometer, and the thing would overheat, and there's coolant like spraying out of and we haven't overloaded it, or we're just like the normal amount of people on it, the normal amount of weight, and we're just like, oh man. So we're like trying to cool down the engine, and I think we had to walk again while the machine's like, oh, it was an absolute nightmare. But it got us up there with a lot of our gear. Eventually, it took a long time. We were supposed to bring the whole gang up there. So we get up top to this base camp that we set up a week or 2 weeks ago. We make it a little better. We're trying to set it up for everyone. Brian this time has remembered his his sleeping pad and sleeping bag. I've got a really thick one, so I'm not gonna freeze all night. Like we've got propane to melt water. We're dialed in. So some other people were supposed to come up, and they were supposed to bring the food. Because I didn't have food. So it was just an absolute cluster. These guys shared their food with me. We had enough to go get through the night, and we were able to start up the next day and having a successful attempt. But it was an absolute. We were supposed to bring, I think it was 10 people up there. They got us 3 up there. The machine ended up breaking down. We're waiting for other people at camp. I'm flying the drone out to look for them. So I'm like, what happened to them? Where are they? And we're just like, I don't know. It's go time. And we had a dog with us, and Cohen, and we're sharing our food with him and getting water. And we are going to bring him up the couloir, but he doesn't really have ice axes and doesn't have good grip for hands. So, and plus my friend Jess probably wouldn't have appreciated it if I brought him up the couloir. So he stayed back in the tent, and he was so happy to hear us come back home, and it was just absolutely, when we got home to the tent, he was freaking out and so happy that, we'd skied and had a successful attempt. So he was a good companion, and slept on top of me and Brian to keep us warm in the night, which is really nice.
Wow. This is an awesome story that we've stumbled into, and I think it really touches on quite a few things. The first thing that I want to point out is I think my theory is that as you get more comfortable in the outdoors, I don't want to say you get more complacent, but you just think about things less. And I, like you, have got a stove story, and it was my fault. I had bought a brand new stove. I'm not going to mention it because it's like a legendary outdoor stove that is like bomb proof. And for whatever reason, I didn't test it beforehand. And I got up in the mountains to go fire it up, and it just wouldn't start. And so I think I bought like the only lemon. So we had to eat cold food for an entire, I think it was probably 7 days or so. So the group was less than thrilled with me, but I'll own that one. Yeah. Now, kind of reflecting back on it, it sounds like all of these, comedy of errors and obstacles make for great stories, and you can laugh about it. What's the mentality on a failed trip when, like, for example, Sean, those first 2 attempts when you had to turn back and just couldn't make it? Is the morale low, or are you still just stoked to be in the mountains?
I would say, and that's one of the reasons that I love skiing with Hayden and the guys, is the morale is always high. And for the most part, I'd say like we're all on the same page. Where it's like, yeah, someone wants to turn around, or someone thinks this is stupid, like it's time to turn around. So I think we've got a really good group of guys. Typically the morale's high, and if we need to turn around, like everyone's good to go, and it's a decision that we want to be skiing for a long time. So yeah,
you have to be happy with your decision to turn around. If you're frustrated or mad or think you made the wrong call, then you're not going to turn around next time. And then that's how you get into tricky situations. So you definitely, like, when everybody decides it's time to turn around, you just got to bite the bullet and turn around and accept it and not be upset.
It sounds like you've got a real good group. Do you find that there's a little bit of a debate or conversation when you reach that turnaround point, that some people are in disagreement?
Only once with our friend Mark, which is also a great story. But I'd say that's the only time that I've been really frustrated. And it was mostly, I would say, because he had previous ideas about certain trips, especially really big trips. The gear makes a big difference, and if you don't have proper gear, it is going to be no matter how what's Mark's phrasing, his he's, yeah, no matter his tolerance or anyone's tolerance for bullshit, if you don't have proper gear, the trip's just going to be so much worse. And that was kind of it was awesome for us because it opened Mark's eyes that, yeah, we need to get proper gear. Now he's so much faster, which is awesome. But this was wild. We were like way up at Jasper, which is pretty much a full day's drive from Calgary. Then we paddled this lake was it 24 kilometers, Hayden?
Yeah, something like that. Moline Lake.
Melgene Lake. And then we got to the other side. We're hiking up this to base camp, and our friend just had too much gear, too heavy of gear, and he was just exhausted and couldn't make it. So we got to the base of this mountain that was like, we wanted to ski it. It was September. Like, the lines were looking good. There's this spine line that Hayden wanted to ski. There's this like other Berkshire I wanted to jump, and we get there, and Mark is just exhausted right at the base of the mountain. He's like, I gotta turn around, I'm gonna be late for work. We're like, dude, we're like 3 days in. He's like, oh, if I keep going, I'm definitely gonna be late for work. I think he was using that as an excuse because he was quite tired from and he's actually in quite good shape. He just had some really old, really heavy gear. So we ended up like pulling the cord there and turning around like 3 days, and then we had to canoe back, like a little frustrated over another 24 kilometers. I didn't tell the canoe story when we got back to the canoes.
Oh, that just made it even worse. We get back and we didn't tie up our canoes, so they blew away in a windstorm while we're up climbing this mountain. And so we get back and they're sunk in the water, and we got to pull them out. Luckily, Sean had a couple of hair ties from his lovely girlfriend Rachel, and we used those to fix the canoes.
Yeah, so yeah, the canoes, we get back, we're cold, we're tired, exhausted. We want to go see the canoes. Like, where's the canoes? So our buddy Nathan's like, I think they're sunk in the lake. And it's cold. Like this water's coming right off the glacier. It's probably like, I don't know, 4 to 6 degrees. And we're kind of sweating. It's windy. We're cold. Now we got to go in this freezing cold lake and drag these canoes out. And then we find out they got holes in them. So we had to our buddy Nathan's pretty handy. The holes weren't too big, but we were able to take my girlfriend's hair ties, put knots on both sides of them, knot them off. And then I think we put duct tape on the bottom, and it held really good. We made it back, no problem.
We made it back.
Yeah, we made it back. So I'd say our group's pretty resourceful. And yeah. And Mark wasn't late for work. So Mark made it back for Empire.
Well, I'm glad that all's well that ends well. And one of the common themes, as you guys kind of describe these stories, right, is that it's such an effort just to get to the start of your objective or start of the actual adventure. Do you find that you choose adventures that just require such a huge run up, or that's just kind of part of what you want to do in the outdoors?
Well, we've been trying to ski some of the highest peaks in Alberta. A lot of those peaks are extremely remote and require sometimes multiple days just to get to the base of these mountains. and they require very specific conditions to be on them, timing when to ski them, and a skill set of crossing glaciers, crossing berg trends, crevasse rescue, avalanche mitigation, winter camping. So a lot of different things come into play. Yeah. Aiden, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just think, I like to ski a lot of close stuff too. Like, it's not like this is all we're doing. There's a lot of really close, right off the roadside that we can get done in a couple hours. But yeah, the real big adventures, it's a supper fest. So, and that's what makes it fun.
Right on. And something that the two of you have been touching on, and I think this is interesting when I compare it to and think through some of my big adventures. I think I've done a little bit more in the rock climbing as opposed to kind of the winter sport activities. And one of the interesting things about rock climbing is if you do it in the right way, it's actually relatively, I want to say relatively safe. And there's usually options to bail off critically big routes, right? That if things aren't going well or if weather comes in, you can kind of adapt to the situation. In your guys' case, let's talk a little bit about the avalanche danger, and because that just seems to really up the level of danger, where you have to, as you were kind of saying at Harrison, wake up and assess the snow conditions and just feel it out a little bit.
Well, yeah, the problem with a lot of these things, like if you're boot packing or you're going up, it's very hard, and sometimes it's not a great idea, especially with multiple people on the line, to protect your route. Like rock climbing, you can lead climb, and some of the lines that we're on, it's just there's no real way to protect it, and if one person falls off, I mean, they're dragging the other person with them. So a lot of these things that we're climbing, they're quite steep, and they're unprotected pitches. So, yeah, I don't know. Anything to add to that, Hayden?
Yeah, like you were saying about bailing out, it totally depends on the line. There's some lines you can definitely pull out if you're not feeling it and take a different route down. The thing with couloirs, which we seem to be really attracted to, is once you're in them, there's not a lot of bailout options, especially like if you're analyzing the snow as you go up. Like the only option is to turn around. There's no side to side or other exit. So yeah, a lot of times it's really committing. You've got to know before you go.
Yeah. And yeah, and with that, a lot of the times the quickest, safest way down is to put your skis on and just get off it too. So it's not like you can really turn around. A lot of it is a time game and minimizing your risk in that area. Like we've had some issues with rockfall, and especially in spring when you've got the snow melt inside these areas. So especially when you bail off, it's get out of there as soon as possible.
And now, are you guys waiting for, I heard you mention kind of spring season, and I think the footage of Fairy Meadows, the actual recording date is in April. Is that safer snow conditions?
It's more predictable snow conditions. So we get in the afternoon it really heats up and gets wet, and then overnight it freezes. So we get this relative safety early in the morning, and we try and get there before either the sun comes out or just as the sun's coming out, as it's beginning to melt, to get and ski the line before it gets in those hazardous kind of hot, wet conditions. So especially in the spring, it's just that predictability that makes it a little more accessible for some of these really big steep lines. Whereas earlier in the season, it's the snowback's a bit of a gamble.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. It's kind of has this I would call it like a Goldilocks zone, where if you're too early and you're trying to ski, it's just you're going to be on ice and it's going to be very dangerous. It's very easy progress on the way up, but it's going to be quite dangerous on the way down because it's going to be hard to hold an edge. And then if you're too late in the day, things are more prone to heating up. You'll get loose, wet avalanches and things will start to slide and to move. So there's this really kind of nice zone in between where typically you're going up early in the morning, and as you're kind of getting towards summit, things are hopefully softening up for the ski down. And sometimes it's a bit of a waiting game, but yeah, it's spring is definitely the most predictable conditions, and that's kind of when we really like to get after it.
Right on. And it sounds like an early day to try to get to the top of these peaks. I would assume too. It sounds like I saw in some of your videos too. The afternoon weather rolls in, and it's probably not a place where you want to be on the summit of some of these mountains.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that. Being late on the mountains, like we've seen some pretty gnarly activity when we're just a little too late, and we got to get out of there fast before anything happens.
Speaking about late, we could tell the Avalanche Steve story.
What, Steve? We haven't even got that was at all yet.
What's that?
I love by the way that you guys have got all these stories. This is awesome. Just to like sit back and hear all your guys' adventures. So go for it. What's the avalanche story?
Well, so we were a little late on the line, and I'd say one of the biggest takeaway from this is that people are very unpredictable. So it was a pretty common line in spring that people like to ski, and we were a little late getting up, and there's a group ahead of us. So we were fairly high up on this face, and it's quite steep. There's kind of a glacier at the bottom, and for context, I'll send you a photo of it later. So I'd say we're about 3/4 of the way up the face, and one of the other parties dropped in. And I mean, as I mentioned before, I've skied in Europe for a while, and the Europeans are really good at sharing the mountains and providing terrain kind of for everyone to use. So the first guy that dropped in, he clearly had not thought of other people, or he just wasn't. He knew that there's people below him, but he really didn't care. So he dropped in and skied directly above us on essentially the boot pack, and that caused some slough to come down, which kind of grew and grew. And my buddy, when I saw it, I was behind my buddy Nathan, and it hit him and spun him around. And we're kind of 2 ice axes out on this face, and I didn't think it was that big, but I could see the impact from it hitting him. So I moved to the left quite quickly and was able to get out of the way. Our friend below us, though, wasn't quite as lucky, and it hit the slough had turned into probably a size 1 avalanche, and it knocked him off the mountain. So Steve ended up tomahawking probably 300 to 400 meters down to the base, where this nice guy that had caused the avalanche promptly skied right past him and left, which was pretty absurd. So that was absolutely wild. Steve, I'll send you a photo of the face that he ended up tomahawking. Only ended up breaking his wrist, which is absolutely incredible when you take a look at it. It was a really big eye opener to us about, starting early. If there's people in front of you, maybe choose a different line, because people are very unpredictable, and unfortunately, not everyone is to share the mountains. So, or to help you out if they cause an avalanche on you, which is also very disappointing. So we had to get helied out of there, we called a helicopter. I think it was about an hour. They came and picked us up, and as we were taking off there, we were just kind of waiting. The sun was hitting the face, and there's avalanches started to go off kind of all around us. It was absolutely wild. So Parks Canada did a couple of trips, dropped us off at the base, but right at the parking lot, and luckily Steve only had a broken wrist, but it was a very sobering account about definitely waking up early and the unpredictability of people ahead of you. And if people are ahead of you, probably just choose a different line. So, yeah. I don't know. Hayden, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, I don't know necessarily choose a different line. Like, I think maybe that's a good idea too. But just I think communication's a thing too. Like, I think they passed us at one point. Like, there's a chance that we kind of had to talk to them, and we didn't on the way up. And maybe that would have been a good opportunity to say, hey, we're both going for the same line. Let's maybe discuss something. And we kind of missed the mark on that. And then the other thing I wanted to say too is originally the helicopter was just going to take Steve off the mountain, the guy who was injured. And just due to the warming and all the avalanches going around, the Parks Canada decided that they're just going to take us all off because it was just such a late in the day and just the avalanches were wild.
It's I mean, it's really like sobering or humbling too. Like if you're ever at the base, and it sounds like when you guys were at the bottom, you were not in the direct line, but these avalanches are absolutely massive. I'm excited to see the picture afterwards. Was there a concern that your buddy Steve was going to get buried, or was it was it just not that style of flow?
No, absolutely. So what actually happened there too is we were a decent sized group and we had split up. So I had let Sean, Steve, and Nathan and Bentley go ahead of us and get the line, and me and the other guys were just going to kind of slow down, hang back, kind of maybe make a different decision, see what was going to happen. And then so I was at the base of the mountain this whole time, and I had a whole first-person view of Steve tumbling down this whole mountain. And he kind of tumbled to the side that I couldn't see, and I fully expected him to be buried. So I ripped over there with my beacon out, ready to dig him out. And this is a part of the reason why I was so frustrated with the other guys. He didn't go over to help because he could have got there before I could. And again, I thought he was buried. So I had to rush over there as fast as I could, which still took, 5 minutes to get up and around the corner to where Steve had fell. And luckily he wasn't buried, but he very well could have been.
And you've kind of alluded to the fact, Hayden, that once somebody gets buried, the clock starts. If you could briefly describe maybe what's the process in the event that somebody does get buried.
Yeah, so if someone gets buried, the first thing you're going to do is pull out your beacon. If there's people in your group, you're going to get everybody to switch to search mode because you don't want to pick up anybody else's beacon who's not buried. And so you're going to try and get to the area you last saw him, and you're going to do a kind of a grid search, hopefully with the rest of your group. And you're going to go in a grid pattern, not to overlap where other people already looked, and get down to where your beacon, it's going to display numbers on the screen, gets to the lowest point. And so once you get to that point, then you're going to pull out your avalanche probe, and you're going to kind of probe in like a circular motion, getting wider and wider, until you find something that you think might be him or her or whoever. And then once you find that person, you're going to leave your probe in where you hit them, and you're going to pull out your shovel and try and dig them out. Ideally from below, and try and dig upwards. Just a little bit of advice.
Absolutely. And so I think if some of my audience maybe picked up on that, is that it sounds like you guys, whenever you're in the backcountry, everybody's wearing a transponder, always set to send, and then all the devices are capable of switching to receive, so that you can, or search mode, I think is the way you phrased it, so that you can kind of find your friend or your lost person. Now, when you get stuck in an avalanche, my understanding is that it hardens extremely quickly, and that it's actually the limiting factor is the amount of air that you have, not necessarily the cold.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so there, as a result, right, there's kind of this limited time, and that's why it's so critical that that other guy who was right there on the scene could have switched on his avalanche transponder and just immediately started searching and kind of like tightened it up in the event that happened. So let's talk a little bit about Fairy Meadows, the film. If we can get into that.
Sure.
So from kind of from watching it, it seems like it's just an amazing cabin in the valley of this like great backcountry skiing area.
Yeah, so the Fairy Meadows is located in the Adamat range of the snowy Selkirk Mountains of British Columbia. And if you're familiar with skiing, you've probably heard of Revelstoke or Golden or Rogers Pass, and it's not too far from that area. So you drive out from Golden towards Rogers Pass. It's probably about a 30-minute drive. Then you catch a helicopter, which is probably about another 30-minute ride to this cabin in the middle of nowhere. And it's it's just magical because a lot of these lines that we like to ski, as we mentioned, it's a sufferfest just to get to the base of them. And Fairy Meadows sits at the base of some incredible mountains, and just these large, dark, granitic spires. And I'm a geologist, so I really appreciate rocks. And if you've heard of the Canadian, you say you're a climber, you've probably heard of the Bugaboos. It's got a very similar rock type where it's very a very striking contrast with these huge spires just popping out of glaciers. It's a magical area.
Yeah, I think it was originally built by Bill Putnam. I think he was like a climber, and he built the cabin as a climbing cabin, which then later on got turned into this whole ski paradise.
I think this is probably the good point to mention the Hellion and the Pine Marten. So at most of these cabins, there's this little cute fuzzy creature, which is a Pine Marten, and it's related to a wolverine, and they're very cunning and smart. And so I'm sure every time it hears the helicopter come in, it thinks, this one's been around the block, so it thinks we got some new meat coming in, and I can just absolutely take these people for all they're worth. So the funny story with this is our friends had brought in some really nice meat and cheese, and they'd left it in this cooler, and the Pine Marten, being devious and smart, had figured out a way to get into the cooler, and our buddy had froze this special cheese for months that he's going to eat up at this cabin, and the the Pine Marten just gets in there immediately, steals all his food, takes it back to its lair. And I didn't see it. I guess it came out at night, but apparently it was very large and very pretty and well fed from all the year's food that it had been stealing all winter. So yeah, you really need to lock up your food. And we'd read the book, and they have this book at the cabin of all the different people that have come there, and pretty much every group had this story about, the Pine Marten either got in the cabin and stole my food or broken the food. So it's clearly a smart creature.
It knows every time those helicopter play, it hears the helicopter, it's time to eat, kind of thing.
Exactly.
That's really cool. So now how long, because I mean, having to helicopter in sounds like quite a logistical hurdle. How long were you guys actually in the cabin?
Yeah, was 7 days or 10 days? I forget at this point.
I think 7 days. Yeah.
And so is this some sort of lottery system? It seems like it's pretty tough to get a slot, to get reservations.
Yeah, our buddy Cam, he's one of the owners of Paradise Skis. He put himself in the lottery. We didn't even know if he was in the lottery. And he's like, "Oh, guys, I won this trip to Fairy Meadows." And at the time, I had never even heard of Fairy Meadows. I didn't even know of what it was about, where it was. And I mean, we were so happy he did that. It's the best trip I've ever been on. So yeah, I think it's quite difficult to win. We just got really lucky. So shout out to Cam.
We didn't win the trip. We still had to pay. It was just we won the opportunity to go.
Yeah.
That's an excellent clarification, right? Yeah. You win the opportunity to spend money, as the case may be. Now, did you, once you found out that you guys were going, and it sounds like, Sean, you hadn't heard of it. How much research into the lines did you do in terms of what you wanted to ski? What was the priority? That sort of stuff.
Honestly, I think someone had posted the guidebook in the group chat, and I pulled it up the night before, and I flipped through the pages, and I saw this one line that stood out that was like incredible. I think I texted to Hayden, and I was like, Hayden, colossal shoulder, we got it. We got to go do this. That was kind of like, yeah, it was a whirlwind trip. I was working this in my old position, and I was so busy. I just didn't have that much time to research it. I was like, I'll, scope the line, see what the mountains give us when we get there. And yeah, the one line just really stood out. It was very committing, and if we had the right conditions, it was going to be kind of like a once in a lifetime thing. So we're very stoked to have that opportunity for Colossal Shoulder.
It's always good to have one of those guys on the trip. Gives you your options, of course. Now, okay, so let's talk about Colossal Shoulder. What is that? And yeah, was that the real steep one that the two of you guys did?
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of a side mountain off Mount Colossal. I guess it would just be to the southwest of Mount Colossal, and it's got this really exposed arête that you climb up. And then the snowpack really got shallow as you transition from the arête to the face. So I remember standing out there, and we like having a deep snowpack because you can get both your ice axes in quite deep, and then you can get your boots in. And this one section was kind of the crux of the climb. It was just getting up and around and over that, and the snow is very thin, and we're kind of standing above these cliffs, and we're just able to get around it enough that we're able to get up and over. So that was, I would say, for me, it was the steepest thing I've ever been on. The upper section of that was, I mean, I think I skied a first ascent in Banff National Park called Cove Couloir, which was probably the second steepest thing I've been on, being very close to some parts on Mount Harrison. But the upper section of this felt, we should have done some measurements, but it was quite incredible, really. Like, there's, between skiing and leaning on the slope, you're just like it wasn't much. So it was definitely two ice axe kind of climb.
Well, that was the big thing from watching the video, is that at that top section was so steep. It wasn't much of a difference at all between laying on the snow and skiing. So, and then as well, you had a pretty narrow width to work with, right? It looked like off to the right, or off to skiers' right, you didn't want to go in that direction. It was going to be a pretty big fall.
Yeah, and then you can't see from the video, but where we actually drop in, there's probably a couple 100-foot cliffs directly below that as well. So it was really like, it was one of those things where we needed good timing. We were, I would say, Hayden, maybe a little late in the day. Like, the snow was it was a little too soft near the top, and it didn't allow the skis to slide that good. But yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually think we were late in the day, and I remember telling Sean that too. Like, as we're climbing, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, it's getting warm, and we had snow, binding up in our crampons, and we had to constantly kick the snow out of our crampons. And originally, we wanted to summit the shoulder, was the original goal, and we both decided that we just don't have the time for it. It was too warm, and we also didn't know what was up there. Sean says in the video that it might have been overhanging the backside of the cliff, and it totally could have been, but it was so hot, and we were just I was almost paranoid about being up there that late. So we got to a good safe point to transition, dug out a slot, and yeah, we wanted to get out of there.
It was really hard to tell, like, especially if you have a cornice, which is, for your viewers that maybe don't know what that is, a wind blows over the top of a mountain, and then a kind of some snow forms, and over the winter it can become bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's lots of videos of people where they think they're standing on the summit of a mountain and they're on a cornice, and it collapses, and it's very dangerous. So we got up to a point, and we could kind of touch a rock there. So like, okay, we're probably not on the cornice, but if we go any higher, we're maybe pushing our luck. So it was with knowing there's probably a large cornice there, and with the timing of the day, that was as high as we were comfortable going, which was quite close to summit there.
And the really interesting thing from watching that video is it seems like we're talking about in the span of a day. I'm curious to know like how far that was from the ski hut, but the actual danger zone and the steepest part was, I don't know, maybe it was a relatively short section of the entire day. I mean, I don't know, maybe 400 meters, 200 meters was that final real steep, real narrow section. Is that about right?
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. Probably one of the things that took us the longest, because it wasn't, I think it was probably 4 or 5 kilometers from the hut. Getting there was relatively fast, but we probably struggled, I don't know, for half an hour, or at least it felt maybe 45 minutes at the top there. It was so steep, there's no way to change over. So we had to dig out this platform for us to stand on. And then enough space for us, which was, you're on a steep thing, you're shoveling snow off, you're trying to get a platform, you're like, that took a lot of time. So it was, I'd say maybe like a quarter of the line was just like digging out a place that we could transition.
Yeah, I think another thing too, I think we woke up a little too late. I think we got in the habit of being at the hut and being right at the base of the lines. When we're used to these giant sufferfests and wanting to start super early, we're like, oh, we have this advantage that we can just start a little bit later. I think we took it too far that day, and we slept in a little too much, and it kind of just ate up our time in the day. So by the time we got there, we were already pushing our luck. So I think if we woke up an hour earlier, we would have been a lot better off.
If I slept in, Hayden means he was hungover from drinking too many beers the night before.
Well, it wouldn't be a ski movie without that, right? Now, and so it sounds like that was the main objective, or one of the bigger objectives of the trip. But you guys also have like just great footage of and I think you referred to it as Sentinel, and is it the Friendship Col? That's just maybe more relaxed snow, better powder, and just a little bit more, I don't know, maybe like fun and flowy. Is that the good way to describe it?
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. It's a little more sheltered. There's kind of mountains on all sides of that. The area, every time we went up there, it was like knee-deep powder. We would get a reset. You're kind of up just at the base of these massive glaciers up there. So it was high enough. I mean, we were super late in the year, but we had amazing snow. It was incredible. And Friendship Col and Mount Sentinel was definitely a treat every time I was up there.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, everything there is big. There's almost no small lines unless you're going in the trees. Everything is full alpine. It really just comes down to the steepness. Colossal was just far steeper than anything else, but everything there was serious. Like, we were having fun. It was all, great, but every line there was relatively serious, I'd say.
Well, that's also a good call out, Hayden. I know one of the days, at least, and maybe multiple, it seemed like by and large you guys had great weather, but there was at least one day where it snowed pretty hard, and you guys went into the trees.
Yeah, that's right. I think we had two days of bad weather. Not even bad weather. It was great. It was actually a great refill kind of middle of the week too. So it was a great thing, but it was two kind of more relaxed days, I would say. And so I think Sean and the girls and Cam went out and did some pillow lines, and me and some of the other guys went out and did another couloir that we didn't get footage of, outpost couloir, and it was actually terrible. So it was good that we didn't get it on footage. But yeah, I think the trees were amazing. We skied the trees the next day with Sean and everybody else. But yeah,
Yeah, we were pretty lucky with the weather. I mean, I think people usually that area is known for just getting snow and getting a lot of snow. So to be able to have visibility to get up nice and high was definitely we were definitely pretty lucky to have those conditions.
Now, Sean, in terms of filming all of this, what kind of gear do you bring, and what is your strategy for capturing all of this?
Unfortunately, it is film a lot because you never know what you're gonna catch on footage. So I have a drone, so a DJI Mavic Mini 2. So it shoots in 4K. It generally works pretty good. I really do like it. We also have I've got a 4K camera that I use that I shot some of the shots on. Just a kind of normal iPhone that actually works pretty good. And then a GoPro. So then combining all of that footage and then my friend's footage all together was, I mean, I think when I first started the video, I think I had like 4 hours or 5 hours of footage in Final Cut Pro, between like all these different, and to go through it, to break it down into segments, and then to chop the footage down to where it was, I thought people would actually want to see it. Was so it was a big process.
I can empathize with that one. The editing process is certainly time consuming, and you can spend as much time as you have to get through it. Um, now, do you would you in terms of capturing the moments and all of that? Will you just try to film everything you can, or are you thinking that like you're gonna get to a strategic spot while Hayden drops in? Is that kind of the way you plan it out beforehand?
Yeah, I feel like, as I've been doing this for longer and longer, I'm getting a better feel for when to turn the camera on and when not to, just to save yourself some editing time. But yeah, overall, like, especially when we were skiing that line, we discussed one of the reasons that I skied down first was I wanted to get to my drone, so I could fly it up and I could get that shot of Hayden coming down and then pan, and so to give the viewers a true perspective of the exposure. So for a lot of these things, I feel like it's, I never took any training for videography, but I think with kind of trial and error, doing it for 10 years, I'm slowly getting a feel for it. So, and Hayden's he's a good model, so he makes it easy. Yeah.
yeah, I just do what he tells me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you're a good model, right? Right. Right on. Now, and then Sean, there was kind of a humorous moment during one of the fairy meadows where you temporarily lost your drone.
This was just this was super frustrating, and I'd say one of the things I'm most frustrated about for the entire trip. So I didn't even know this was a thing, but I had logged on to my DJI app before, and it put a limit on how far you could fly the drone for some reason, and I think it was around 100 feet, or it wasn't far, and I didn't even know, like, I'd been flying drones for about 10 years. I've never had that problem before, so I don't know if that was on a software update. I don't know if they've removed that since then, but it had this limit. So a lot of the shots I was having to pan down, like when Hayden dropped into Beam Me Down Scotty. What I would love to do is pull the drone far away next to the cliff face to get a really nice photo of the line and brought it down with him. So the kind of the cool thing about the notch was we got up there, as I set my drone up, and I'm flying it away, and it's okay, it's going further away, or I'm flying away, it's going further away, and I'm thinking, okay, well, did I get service somehow? Like, how is this possible? So then eventually it goes, okay, you can't fly it anymore. And so I'm trying to bring it back to me and it won't come back to me. And it says, okay, it only goes to this limit. And I'm like, oh, my GPS must have jumped. So the problem was, I think it was maybe like 300 meters from me and probably 300 meters from at least maybe 350 meters from the ground. And same thing. The ground limit, it wouldn't allow me to land it. So I had the drone probably, I don't know how far it fell, but it probably fell, oh geez, 250 meters into the snow. And luckily the snow was quite soft, and also luckily I was able to retrieve it. I would have lost all the footage from the trip. Like it would have, I was just there panicking. And I'm up there, and I told one of our friends, Ashley, we're like, oh yeah, well, that's gonna help her walk. It's her first couloir, and I get up there and I just take off, and then I get to the bottom, I find my drone, and then I'm like, oh shit, Ashley's up there. So Hayden and the girls helped her down, and she did a great job at getting down. And contrary to what the video says, she might have been a little mad at me for good reason.
It's because Ashley's actually my landlord, and so like I live with her, and so I had to hear about this for it never ended. I had to hear about how bad she was at Sean, and me too. And it's even funnier because we're up there and Sean's freaking about his drone, but this is a super steep, icy run, and we're at the top of this thing. And Sean's worried about his drone, and like he trying to get down, and we're stuck up here. Like, what are we gonna do?
So this is where the priorities of a filmmaker deviate.
I was like, it was like 5 days of some of the best drone footage I've ever taken. I was like, I don't want to lose this. Oh, I was so happy, and I ever since then I'm like signing the app before service. So yeah, it was wild. Oh, I feel like this podcast is just us telling stories about everything that's going wrong. Like, which is most things we do. So,
well, it is really cool to see how you guys take on these huge objectives in the mountains and then kind of overcome them. And obviously, there are challenges along the way that end up being the better stories. Is my takeaway from this. Now, do you guys have future upcoming projects this year?
Well, I'm to France. I don't know. Are you coming to France? What's going on with that?
I would like to go to France. I've got some family issues, so I'm just seeing how that's kind of playing out. I've just got to so yeah, once I get a little bit more information on that, I'll make the decision. But I think we might be going to Chamonix this year. And I'd love to join the guys on that, obviously. Because I think we want to go if we end up going to off the Guy de Midi in Mont Blanc. So we want to ski the highest mountain in France, which is some very large glacier terrain. I think they've got some couloirs picked out. Yeah, I think that's definitely on Hayden's on his list for this year.
Yeah, if Sean doesn't come, I'll have to get a GoPro and figure how to make my own videos. Maybe I'll send them to you afterwards. You can edit them for me.
Man, I can edit away. It's a lengthy process though. No promises on the timeline.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I've got a list. A lot of the are some of the largest mountains in Alberta. And the mount. The one that we told you about, the frustrating one with Mark, where it was like 3 days in, paddling a canoe 26 kilometers across the lake, like that one is the highest on my list because I'm still very frustrated about it. So I'd say like from everything, that's the one that I want to go back and like check off, because that was probably one of the biggest suffering days I've ever had to not ski. So that's number one, I'd say, on my list.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Sean. I'll definitely join you once that lines up. I wanna get paddling across that lake again.
And just like our other one, we've came up with a creative solution. I work with this German group that we do some ski guiding, and it's called Stumbach. One of the guides there, it sounds like he's got a couple little sailboats with some electric motors, because on the Canadian lakes you can't have a gas motor because you can't pollute the lake. So you can either go by human power paddling, or by sail, or with an electric motor. So we might have a very similar weird technology to get us to the line again, which will be pretty interesting. So fingers crossed that goes this year.
Right on. Well, it sounds like the two of you have got some really cool objectives lined up, and potentially got to figure out the logistics a little bit, but great adventures coming up. Man, Sean and Hayden, I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was great to hear all the stories, and it was actually really inspiring and motivating to hear like the big lines that you guys go after, and these big adventures, and also that things don't always go well, and just the mindset of how to push through and overcome them with really a great attitude. So thank you both for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having
me. Yeah, thank you very much, Eric. We really appreciate you reaching out, and yeah, we'd be happy to come back if you ever want to have us for another chat. And yeah, it was thanks again.